Hi there. So this is our week 4 session A, right? The first session of week 4. And we are going to learn the functions that will change how you work with data as a data analyst. Specifically, we are looking at the if, count if, sum if, and average if functions, right? So, of course, as usual, we are using our data sets. Now, last week we answered some business questions manually by filtering by each region one at a time. Nothing, no, for this place, noting the total results, then changing the filter and doing it again. So it worked, but it was too slow, right? It was a bit slow. Let's not say too slow, it was a bit slow. So, but today I'm going to show you a completely different approach. Functions that answer the same questions automatically. We're not going to filter anything. We're not filtering anything, right? And uh, no manual recording as well. No switching back and forth, right? With just one formula, you can get total revenue for all 8 regions simultaneously. With another one, you can count transactions, right? You can count the transactions you had, all right? You have you can count transactions by category across the entire data set, right? In seconds. This will be the functions that separates a typical casual Excel user from actual analyst. So by the end of tonight, you'll never go back to manually filtering for summary calculations. So, like I said, we'll be looking at if, count if, sum if, average if, right? So let's get started with, of course, if, which is the most fundamental decision-making function in Excel. So what does if do? If answers a very simple question, right? It answers one question. Is the particular condition true or false? And based on the answer you give, it does one thing or the other, meaning it does something if it's true or it does another if it is false. In plain English, if what you do with if is it will check, is this condition true? If yes, do this. If it is false, do this instead. Something like that, right? Well, let's look at an example so that maybe it's going to be easier to understand with examples. Say, for instance, I type if, of course, don't forget the equal sign. If 5 is greater than 3, say yes. What should happen if 5 is not greater than 3? So the condition is if it is yes, if it is greater than 3, say yes. If it is not, say no. So that's basically what the if function does. It's used to check condition or to make decisions, right? So now, if this condition has been met, the first instruction you gave it will be executed or it will give you the second. Now, if 5 is greater than 3, it should give you yes. But if you had asked if it is greater than 6, you get no. So that's exactly how it works, right? So that's exactly how if the if works. And this is the simplest form of if. A condition, a true result, a false result. That's basically it. Now, we could actually, in the context of Excel, you can use this. Say, for instance, you have some figures here. Or let's say we are looking at grades of students, and you want to see if a student passed or failed. Now, passing or failing, and you set the cutoff mark at 50. If a student gets 50 and above, passed. If they get 49 below, it's failed. So let's say you have the scores of some students, right? Oh, sorry. Um, and then you want to check, you want to print their grade here, right? Their status. Did they pass or fail? This is course, right? For instance, and this is status, for instance. So how do you decide if the student pass or fail? The idea is not to do it manually because obviously in such a scenario you have multiple students, and if you insist on typing it manually, there will definitely be mistakes, right? So what you do is you use an if statement, or if formula function, and you say if whatever is here is greater than, since 50 is a pass mark, greater than 49, it should what? Print, show us pass, or if it is not, give us fail. right? It's a simple condition. If this condition is greater than 49, add pass to this cell. If it's not, display fail. So now once you have this, as you can see, 55 is greater than 49, so the student passed. You can simply just drag it down and you get the pass, fail, pass, pass, those that pass and those that fail. So this is the simplest form of an if function. Now let's apply this particular if function to our data set since we've seen some examples. Say I'd like to add a column. All right, say I would like to add a column, this column that's called performance flag, right? This column is supposed to automatically flag each transaction as high value or low value based on the revenue, right? So perhaps you have a rule that says any transaction with revenue that is above 100,000 should be flagged as high value transaction. Below that is low value. What are we saying? If you have a transaction whose revenue is more than 100,000, you have that transaction is high value. If it is below that, it is low value. So you use an if function to carry out this formula to carry out this decision making. So you say if whatever is here is greater than 100,000, right? Then tell me that it's high value. That's if it is true. Else, tell me that it's low value, right? So once you have this, you find that transactions that are way above that are above 100,000 will be flagged as high value, and those that are below will be flagged as low value transactions. That's how this particular performance flag if works, and we have our performance flag that tracks our transactions because every transaction is now automatically flagged as high or low. Now this formatting was added is because I've done this already, but I lost the recording. That's why I'm doing it all over again. But I added this formatting here. Uh, all right. So what happened was I added a conditional formatting rule where I said I used the highlight cell rules and I chose to flag the transactions. When a transaction is high value, it should be flagged as green, right? High value, sorry. Yeah, high value. Should be flagged as green. And when it is low value, no, let's leave it like that. Doesn't matter. So that's how the conditional formatting works. Now you can see clearly what transactions are high and which ones are low. They will stand out properly. So we can even decide to add some conditions, more conditions to the rule. What if we are trying to see, what if I want more than two categories, say I want three categories, right? Let's say we want to flag the transaction since the revenue varies. We want to flag the transaction in such a way that you have high, medium, and low uh, performance, right? So let's use this revenue tier. Let's call it here so that it will be different from this performance flag. So this will be if, right, revenue is greater than 100,000, right? Then tell me it's high. Now this is when it's true. You are saying if it's greater than 100,000, tell me it's high. But like I said, we want three conditions. We want to see high, medium, and low revenue, right? So what you could do next, you need to do next is using another if because you have two other conditions where one can be true and the other would be false. So you need another if condition to say if I2 is greater than 100. Okay, I was supposed to use 200 there. Give me medium. And then since this is the last condition you have, tell it to give you low if it is not. It is not greater than 100. So the way it works is that you are saying if I2 is greater than 200, that means that particular condition is true. Then what? Tell me high. What about if it's not? If it's not, you now have two other conditions that can either be that could possibly be true, right? It's either the revenue is below 100 or is above 100,000, even though it's below 200, right? It can be below 200 but still be above 100 or below 100. So that's why you need another if to write those last two conditions you have, which makes it a true or false statement. So if it's not high, then if it is greater than 100, tell me medium. If it's not, that means it's even less than 100, then it's definitely low, right? So that's how uh, the if statement works. This one that has multiple if is called a nested if, which is an if inside another if. Now we have three tiers: high, medium, and low, right? This is how you normally categorize continuous data into meaningful groups, right? So if you notice, there's a logic to what we've done now. What's the logic? The logic is that you should always check for the highest condition first and work downwards. What am I saying? The highest condition is being greater than 200. So if you are writing an if statement, you start from the highest condition first and then you go downwards, right? Because if you check the lowest first, everything falls into that particular first category. If you are checking if it is less than 100 first, that would be true, would always be true. Not always be true. If you are checking, for instance, if it's greater than 100,000, it's those that are greater than 200 and those that are greater than 100. So if you are checking if you start from the lowest, everything falls into the first category. All right. We now have if with a nested if. The next thing we are going to look at is using if with text conditions, right? We've been using numerical conditions. You can choose to use if with text conditions. Now, say I want to flag all transactions from Kano, right? Kano transactions specifically. What do? You can use if, right? And you say if where do you see transactions is on the state is in the region. So if D2, right, is equal to Kano. If this is true, then tell me Kano transaction. If it is not, then tell me it's the other region. It's as simple as that. So anyway, the transaction is not Kano, will not show Kano transaction, it will show the other region, right? So I think this our data was sorted. Is it okay? It's not sorted. I don't think it is. All right, so that's yeah. So there's one thing you need to notice with this condition with Kano. You will notice that text conditions go inside quotation marks, right? Unlike numbers that you don't need a quotation mark. If you look at the top here, the formula bar, as you can see, D2 is equal to Kano. But when we said I2 greater than 2, we did not use quotation. In the condition, it's only text conditions that take quotation marks. Numbers don't need quotation marks. This is useful when you want to isolate maybe a specific category for the analysis, especially with this text condition. Uh, with COUNTIF, you can count how many rows meet a specific condition. Let's take a look at the region column. As you can see, we have all the regions we've been using so far. So let's say you are trying to ask how many transactions carried out in the Kano region, right? Without COUNTIF, to count transaction, you would filter for Kano only and read the count from the status bar, right? But with COUNTIF, you can just use COUNTIF to filter the data set and just get the transactions that are from Kano. Then if you would like, you can filter for Lagos, Abuja, and the rest separate using COUNTIF. So COUNTIF does all of this in one formula actually per region, right? So for Kano, instead of using filter, you can just use one formula without messing with your data set. You can just use one formula that will count that does all the filtering and counting the transactions itself. So let's take a look at what I'm trying to say. For that, we are going to use a new sheet that we've created called Business Insights, right? All right. So on cell L5, cell A5, so that we can get space at the top there, I would like to type transaction If you don't have the business insight sheet, you create a new sheet called business insight and do this transaction count by region, right? Then in A6, let's have region there, and then in B6, let's have transaction counts. This is the header of what we have there. So let's have all the regions we have. Let's try to do this in alphabetical order. You have Abuja, Enugu, Ibadan, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Lagos, and then Port Harcourt. Right. So now what we are trying to achieve is we want to use COUNTIF to count the transactions that are from Abuja only and the transactions are from Enugu and the rest, right? So how do you do this? You call on the formula, the function COUNTIF, right? And then the way it works is you first, as you can see, it's the argument it needs is you tell it the range and then the criteria. So what is the range where you want it to actually go and check and count? What are you trying to filter and count? So it's going to be our region column because that's where the states are. So you select the region column back on the sheet where you have your data, even though we are doing this on the business insight sheet. While referencing the cell, you can reference the cell from different sheets, right? So if you look at the formula bar here, it's still working on that. We've selected that particular column D, which is the region column, then comma, and then now I give you the criteria. The criteria is A7, right? Which is Abuja, right? So if you take a look at the address here, it's saying COUNTIF, and then you give it the range where you want to count the filter, the unique entries, right? And then you give it a range where you want to count the transactions, right? Which is the state, the times Abuja appears in this region column. And then what exactly are you looking for, which is Abuja? That's why we chose A7 because A7 is Abuja. That means if I had wanted to do this here in Enugu, after selecting column D from the sales data cleaned, I'm going to say A8 instead, right? So of course, you're not expected to do this manually for each state. You can just autofill and copy down the formula. So as you can see, you have 28 transactions for Abuja, 40 for Enugu, 39 for Ibadan, 35 for Kaduna, and so on and so forth. So all 8 regions are counted simultaneously. So you didn't need to filter this particular data set, switching sheets, one formula copied 8 times, right? So if you look at the results, we can try to understand, okay, which region has the most transaction, which has the fewest. So as you can see, by looking at this, you can see that Kano has 43 transactions and Abuja has 28. So Kano has the maximum transaction, while Abuja has the. So if you are looking for the max, for instance, say we call this maximum or highest transactions. You can just get your max and then accept. While lowest would be, you can just get your mean instead this time, and then you get the cells. So you have 43 and 48 as your maximum and lowest transaction. So so as you can see, Kano is has the highest transaction while Abuja has the lowest. So let's do this so that we can show that what we have below there is the highest and the lowest transaction. All right. So that's how COUNTIF works. So this is what I meant last week when I said week 4 would answer some business questions, right? So what took probably 10 minutes of manual, more than 10 minutes manual filtering last week, will just take you a few seconds with COUNTIF rather. So apart from COUNTIF that we used here, right, there is also COUNTIFS, right, which is multiple conditions. So as COUNTIF counts based on one single condition, just a single condition, COUNTIF can be used to count based on multiple conditions simultaneously. Let's say I want to know, here we've seen transaction of each state, right? Transaction count of each region. So let's say I want to know, even though we know that Kano has 43 transactions, I would like to know how many transactions from Kano were paid with transfer, knowing that we have payment method, right? So I want to know how many transactions in Kano were paid with transfer. So how do you do this? We'll still do this on our business insight sheet. And let's say on cell D6, let's do it here. And I say Kano plus transfer. Let's just call it Kano plus transfer, right? Count. So instead of COUNTIF, you are using the COUNTIFs, which will give you the chance to use multiple conditions, right? Criteria. So the first thing is you give it the criteria range, right? And then what exactly you are looking for. Like you give it the criteria and then the range, and then you give it the second criteria. The first criteria, the range, the second criteria, the range. Let's look at it. So we are saying, let's say we want to see transactions that are carried out in Kano and that were transferred. So the first thing to do is you first of all give it the criteria. What is the criteria? I want the transactions carried out in Kano, which means where region, take a look at the top here, is what? Kano. And then what? Where payment method, you now pick the payment method column, is what? Transfer. Right? So this will count only the transactions where the region is Kano and the payment method is transfer. And we have that at 16. So out of that 43 transactions, it's only 15 transactions that the region from Kano, out of the 43 transactions from Kano, it's only 16 that the transaction was carried, that they paid using transfer, right? So that's how you use the multiple. You can use this to see, let's copy the formula and say we are trying to see Kano transaction, but with perhaps something like let's say, what are the payment methods we even have there? Credit, POS. Let's say we are looking for the transactions that were carried out, that they paid using the POS machine, right? So you can see that's 6. That's 6. So 16 were transferred, 6 were with POS, and maybe you find the rest, credit, cash. And cash, what about cash? You can still look for cash. All we need to change is the payment method from transfer to cash, right? And cash is 7. So this is how you can easily filter without tampering with your data set itself. So this will count where the region is Kano, and I told you, and then you need to pick a payment method. So what about if you are trying to see do we have we have that here. Say for instance, I'm trying to count where the region is Kano and the transaction is a high value transaction. So you can simply say is equal to count, since it's COUNTIFS. Since you have multiple transactions, so you are looking for multiple conditions, where region is Kano, and for instance, performance flag is what? High value, right? So range criteria, you'd have where you have Kano as the region and the performance flag is high value. Basically, that's what it is. But what if you want to use numbers in this your, what's it called, filtering? Say for instance, instead of high value, I was looking for where the revenue is greater than 100,000, instead of just putting up the high value there. So say I was looking for where revenue is what? This is how you do it. This 100,000 or 1 million. All right. So what happened here is I'm saying where the ID is the region is Kano, but revenue is greater than 1,000. Now, if you 100,000, now if you take a look at this, you'd see that we had the greater than symbol in quotation, and then the ampersand, and the 100,000. So the thing is, when you want to use operator in this particular context, if you want to use an operator in your formula, or you're trying to filter something using an operator like greater than, less than, and the rest, the operator would have to be wrapped in quotes, right? While the number and then followed by greater and then an ampersand, then the number. So this basically means greater than 100,000, right? But the way it works is you'd have to wrap the symbol in quotation, and then the ampersand, the 100,000 naira will be free. We won't need any quotation. That's how you type that. So this is basically an advanced filtering done entirely with just a single formula. No manual filtering needed, right? All right, so let's continue. Take a break. Let's continue. The next thing we're done with COUNTIF. The next thing we are going to use is SUMIF and then AVERAGEIF, right? So SUMIF, on the other hand, what it does is that it sums values that meet a particular condition as well, right? So it's the same structure as COUNTIF, but instead of counting rows, it adds up numbers. All right, so let's say with SUMIF, what is the argument needed? So as you can see, you give it a range, a criteria, and then the summary. So let's look at an example so that we understand what this means. When you give it a range to check, and then you give it the criteria and you give it the range to sum. So let's build our revenue we have already, but this time by region, right? By region. Let's say still in this our business insights, let's take a look at a so let's take a look at A17 and get ourselves total revenue by region. Right. So let's say region is here, right? And then here we'd have total revenue. Right. So let's have all our states again. They're here. You can just copy them down. We have our states there. Right. So now let's get the total revenue of Abuja, like sum up all the money made in Abuja, right? All the transactions, you just sum it up for only where the revenue is Abuja, right? So instead of this time you're using SUMIF, right? So you are saying I want to see what's the range, right? The range to check is D, right? So you are looking for what? That very first state is in A19, and then what do you want to sum? The revenue of that particular column, and that's all, right? So it's saying SUMIF check for A19, which is Abuja. So check for Abuja in column D of the sales data cleaned, and then sum where anywhere all the revenues of Abuja in this particular data set. That's exactly what happened. So this total is not the total of all the revenues, it's just the total for Abuja. Now, obviously, with what is it called? You can just copy this down, and then you get exactly what you're looking for. So it's that simple. It's that simple. So you have the total revenue of Abuja, Enugu, and the rest. So you can even read it through and see the region. We can read through this. What's it called? And see which region will have the most revenue, and see which region that has the most revenue, right? So by looking at this, we have what? We have 3 million, and we have 5 million. We have 5 million. Now, as you can see, this is stressful. I might as well just take the max, so I can just see what I'm looking for. I don't have to be using my eyes. So it's 57,000. Which region has 57,000? It's still Kano. It's still Kano. And then which one has the lowest? The lowest is Port Harcourt, right? So let's say Kano, the region with the highest. Kano, the region with the highest revenue. Let's point it out and use green on that so that it stands out. And then Port Harcourt, the region with the lowest revenue. Let's make Port Harcourt right. Yeah. Let's make Port Harcourt red. So that's how this would work. Let's take this out so we don't need it anymore since we've identified the one that has the lowest and the highest. Actually, I didn't do what we did at the top here, but notwithstanding, let's leave it. So now let's compare this to the transaction counts table we have above here, right? As you can see, Kano has the highest revenue, Port Harcourt has the lowest. Is the region with the most transactions also the region with the most revenue? Yes, because Kano has the most transactions and it has the most revenue, right? But if you take note of look at something, well, the region with the lowest revenue is not the region with the lowest transaction count because Abuja has the lowest transaction count, but Port Harcourt even has 36 transaction count, more than Kaduna, right? So, but it still has the lowest revenue. This is because highest transaction doesn't automatically mean highest revenue, not necessarily because a region might have fewer transactions but larger individual sales, right? Maybe you have someone that bought goods in millions, right? And then so this will give it higher total revenue despite having a lower transaction count, like in the case of Abuja, that has a high, even though it's not that, it's still the second lowest, but it's still higher than way higher than Port Harcourt. So this particular small something you notice is what makes this analysis valuable. It's just this nuance, right? So just like with transaction counts and COUNTIF, SUMIF also has the version you can use to filter multiple conditions, right? Because SUMIF extends SUMIF to handle multiple conditions with the S. So say I want, just like the same way we have the total revenue, but say I'd like to have the total revenue from Kano transactions paid by transfer, right? Just like we did here. So this time we are looking for, say, for instance, total revenue from Kano transactions paid by transfer. So how do you do it? It's just as simple as saying SUMIFs. This time there's a bit it's a bit different from SUMIF because in SUMIF, as if you take a look at the argument it's looking for, it wants the sum range, the criteria range, then the criteria range, right? Because in SUMIF the sum range will come first, then the condition pairs, right? This is different from SUMIF where the sum range comes last. It's a very, very common mistake that people make. Because if you take a look at the SUMIF we have here, the condition, the criteria comes first, and then the range that you want to sum comes last. But when you are using SUMIFS, the one with the S, which is multiple conditions, uh, the sum range will come first, and then you can keep adding your criteria. That's exactly what happens with SUMIFS. So the sum range, like I said, the other time we used revenue as the last argument, but this time it will come first, and then the criteria is we want where region is Kano, and then we want where transfer method, payment method rather, is transfer. These are the multiple conditions we are using for this particular SUMIF. So it's going to give you where the region is Kano, and then the payment method is transfer. Compare this to this, as you can see, it's still a long way from, because you can just get, let's see what will be left if you subtract this from this particular figure of the Kano total revenue in Kano. So it's going to be this minus this, right? So you have 4 million left because you 1 million plus the transaction was with transfer. So that's how SUMIF works. SUMIF and the SUMIFs, that's how they work. Oh, did I remove this? I wasn't trying to get it off. All right, apart from that, you have the next thing, apart from SUMIF, we have the average if, right? Average if, just like the name tells, it calculates the average of values that meet a particular condition. It's also the same structure as SUMIF. So average if, so say conditional, the first thing is you give it the range, the criteria, the average, the particular column you're trying to get the average of. So what are we saying? Let's do it below here. Let's say average transaction value by category, right? So here, let's set the category, and then let's say it's average revenue, right? Let's pull this. So let's list out the categories we have. We have food and staples, beverages, household, personal care, stationery, All right, so here in B31, we'll now calculate the average if for food and staples, which is A31. So the cell address of food and staples is A31. So, but let's type out average if, and then the first thing is range, criteria, average range, right? So the range is going to be, we are trying to see categories, right? So what's the column for categories is F. So you get the F column, you pick the F column, comma, what are you looking for? A31, which is food and staples. And then of course, I do know you recall the reason why you can't just type food and staples here is because you would like to autofill the formula so that the rest of the regions would also be filled in without you having to calculate every region using the formula, the function. So then you have the, what's it called? You have the range to check, right? We've given the range to check the condition. And then now what's left is the range to average, right? You want to see the range to average, which is the revenue, because this, for the sake of, we are trying to see average transaction value by category. All right, so we have that. We can just close our brackets. We can see that the average transaction, right, value by category for food and staples is around what, 271,000. So you can just copy this down and you have the rest. Now stationery is saying div by 0, right? Division by 0. Probably because this is E, not A. Right. So that's the error. I used A instead of E. All right. From looking at this, which category has the highest average transaction? Now you can use the highest and look at it, or we can just take the maximum to be sure. All right, this is food and staples. So let's have that in green. So and then which one has the lowest? So we can just edit this out. So it's household. So let's make that red. Fine, and then we get rid of this. So when the person looking at this, when the person sees this, knows immediately which product category, maybe if it's the manager, you'll be able to know immediately which product category commands the most money per sale, right? So and can direct sales rep accordingly based on this particular data. Okay, food and staples command the most revenue per sale. So you can tell straightforward that the least important category is the household category. So now we have three tables. We have the transaction count, the total revenue by region, and then the transaction. Let's get this as well. Let's get it to say 22, for instance. And then the transaction value by category, right? So now we have three tables on this particular business insight sheet, right? Like I've listed, all built with formulas, no filtering, no manual recording, just fully automatic. So because that means if the underlying data changes, because you've been referencing the data here, the table here updates instantly. It will just update instantly. Anytime this particular data changes there, it will update instantly, right? So because let's say we tamper with our total revenue with the transactions in Abuja. Let's look for a transaction in Abuja, region Abuja. So this is actually Abuja. So let's mess with this. Okay, yeah, it's a formula rather. Let's not mess with that. Let's mess with unit price. Let's make the unit price 500 naira. Before that, let's take a look at what the total revenue of Abuja is. 354,629, 6200, 354,6200. So, but when you make this 500, let's see if we still have 354. As you can see, we don't have 354. In fact, let's copy this and paste it here. No, sorry, I wasn't trying to copy, paste the value instead, right? Not the formula. So, as you can see, you have 354. When you get, take it back to 9, let's do this. Let's copy this and then, here, copy this. All right. So now let's tamper with it. 500. So now you can see they are no longer equal. The main one, when the price it was 9,500, was around 354,629, but now it's 328. That means it has reduced one way or another. So anytime that particular sheet is updated, this particular summary business insight will also be updated automatically. So that's what happens. So let's correct. Let's get rid of all this, and then you can continue. So we have these three tables. The next thing to do is to bring it all together, right? So let's combine everything we've built now into one comprehensive summary, right? In these are business insight sheets. So let's add one final table that brings the region count, total revenue, and average revenue uh, all together in one view. So let's do it around here. Let's call this full regional summary. Let's have the region here. Let's have the transactions here. Let's have, say, total revenue. And no, let's have the here. Let's have average revenue. All right. So right here in B40, which reflects to A40, which is Abuja. Let's start with the COUNTIF to get the transaction. So COUNTIF sales region, and then of course the first one is A40, filter for A40. Then we have 28 for Abuja, and then the rest are theirs as well. While here in C40, we are looking for the SUMIF. So we're going to get region again, but this time we are looking for A40 still, but which is the criteria, and then the range to sum comes after, right? So we can get this down as well. Average if for the average revenue, right? So we're getting the A40 for the first one, and then the range to get the average, right? So that's that. We have that ready. We can just reduce these decimals. Let's leave it like that. All right. So let's format it a bit. Perhaps let's even merge some of the cells. Let's merge some of the cells. All right. So let's use a border as well, but let's use all borders in this, right? And then let's make the header row and then the right up, maybe probably white. I don't know. I'm good at formatting things. Yeah. So, well, for the most part, we will leave it at that, and you can format it the way you want. So, as you can see, you now have 8 regions, 3 metrics built, right? Every transactions, total revenue, and everything, and all were built entirely with 3 formulas copied 8 times. That's just it. So, this is a professional analytical summary. A manager could make real business decisions from this one table only, right? Very real business decisions just from this one table. This is something you could you should actually try out and do yourself. So that's session A of week 4. We're done. Of course, we saw if, nested if, count ifs, some if, and some ifs, average if, and how to combine all three into a professional summary table. So, of course, in the session B, we went deeper. If you are done with this, try to watch the session B to get more out of this. All right. So, good night. See you in the next class.